I will gavel us in. Good afternoon. With 7 of us present, we're going to go ahead and start our Board of Education work session. Today is Tuesday, July the 16th, 2024. We have several important items on the agenda today, and we may try to go into closed session at the end of the work session for about 20 minutes or so. So please keep that in mind as we're budgeting our time. Our first issue on the agenda today, addressing school utilization concerns. You see specifically Pine Hollow Middle School and Roseville Middle School. And presenting we have Mr. Glenn Carosa. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So this conversation is a follow-up from the June Facilities Committee meeting. So a lot of the slides that you've seen in this presentation are repeat slides from what we shared with you earlier and what we've shared with the public. I know for the sake of time today, we'll get through several of the slides today. I'm going to stop short at the public feedback section. So this way, when we come back at the August board work session, we can spend a little bit more time discussing and getting your feedback on the staff and public feedback that we've received throughout this process. Okay? So here, we're just here to share information that addresses school utilization concerns at 2 underutilized multi-track year-round middle schools, Pine Hollow and Roseville Middle. Now, when we say underutilized, it's because we're operating under the multi-track year-round calendar. Okay, that capacity provides us several hundred more seats than we would if we were operating under the traditional calendar. And what we'd like to do is talk to you about how we come to the decision of making these recommendations to you and walking through from start to finish for the public to understand what data and information we use to get to this point. Just to remind everyone how all of this aligns to our strategic plan, our core belief number 7, strategic priority number 3, and aims 19 and 20. And then again, all of this is rooted in policy, right? And so just going back to policy 4150, specifically operational efficiency, because when we talk about school capacities, that's why we're here discussing with this today with you. And just for everyone's understanding, because a lot of times when we talk about operational efficiency, people choose to use their own wording. This is straight from policy. All right, so let's review. So there are 6 steps in the process that the Office of School Choice uses when it talks about the work that they're doing. And first starts off with the enrollment forecast, okay? So this is a slide you've seen before. This is the projected 10-year forecast that we get and present to you in February of every year. And this map generates a visual of that 10-year projection. So when you look at the arrows pointed up and down, that shows where we're projecting an enrollment gain or reduction in those particular areas. Okay. Then we get to the 1-year projections, and so this is where you'll see this in our projected FIR presentations, generally in February and March. And here we have the elementary crowding maps. So to understand this map, areas that are in yellow are right in that sweet spot of where we want our school utilizations to be, anywhere between 90 and 100%. The orange and reddish areas are overcrowded schools, and the white areas are underutilized. So here you see the same for middle schools. You can see not as many crowding concerns for middle school, and we'll be discussing 2 middle schools today. To highlight where they are, the circle on the left of the screen is Pine Hollow Middle School, and the circle on the right is Roseville Middle School. And then again, our high school projected crowding for 24-25. So after we talk about our projections with you, then we get into our capital improvement plan, and that's the work that we do with the office, facilities design and construction, academics, a lot of other departments come together to create that 7-year plan. And so here is just a recap of the schools that are planning to open in the current 7-year plan. And then we've got a table that represents what those schools look like with the schools. The 4 schools, Bowling Road, Pleasant Plains, Rex Road, and Felton Grove, are the schools that are planning to open for 25-26. So then after we do the CIP plan, we have our annual enrollment plan. Ms. Susan Pulliam and the Office of Student Assignment come through. They're doing their public engagement currently for the 25-26 school year. You obviously know a lot of that process, but I wanted to share with everybody how it fits into our timeline throughout the year for the public to understand. And again, all things assignment planning related, this is the website to go to. This gives you any of the information that they've been sharing, any data that you need for the upcoming assignment planning, this is the place to go. And then here's just a sample of the timeline. That process begins in May. and then concludes in November with the board voting on the final plan. And that would be for that upcoming school year. So this year, you'll vote in November 24 for the 25-26 school year. And then shortly thereafter, that next school year, or that next calendar year, we start going into the cap schools. We'll make recommendations of which schools to add an enrollment cap, because there are many different levers we can choose. You've got capping, you've got reassignment, and then what we'll be discussing today are calendar changes. Those are the three levers that the district can use to deal with growth and crowding. And then we just have a list of our cap schools. Here are the elementary cap schools, and then our middle school and high school. Okay. Which brings us to where we are today. The options that we use to address school utilization concerns. This could be overcrowding or underutilization. I just want to kind of stop for a second and talk about the purpose of multi-track year-round. The purpose of multi-track year-round for the school system is to help us with dealing with high growth, okay? Because we do not control building permits and rezonings, we are at the whim of our municipalities, and so therefore we need to make sure that we're providing schools in areas that have high growth. And unfortunately, we have to find land in those areas as well, which is very difficult. So we've used multi-track year-round to help limit the number of buildings that we've had to open over the years. And the way we do that is because 25%, approximately 25% more students can be assigned to a school when we utilize the multi-track year-round calendar. And just for parents who aren't aware of the multi-track year-round calendar, a lot of times people feel like, oh, my child's going to go to school all year long. No, it's the same amount of school days as a traditional calendar. I posted a calendar here so parents can see an example how to read this. The areas in white, so if you're looking at the red being track 1, blue track 2, yellow track 3, and green track 4, the areas in white are the days that they would be tracked out, their days off. When it's all said and done, they still get the holidays that generally you'll see on the traditional calendar, except they won't get a long summer, a 3-month summer. They'll have 4 3-week breaks throughout the year to accommodate for that. So why do we need multi-track year-round? And it's really important to understand the North Carolina legislation that limits the class sizes in grades K through 3 severely impacted the Wake County Public School System. We lost over 9,000 seats as a result of this legislation. And multi-track year-round allows our district to remain in compliance with that legislation. And to just kind of put it in perspective, our largest elementary schools are built to a 716 capacity. It would take approximately, and it's actually more than, 13 elementary schools to cover the loss of that many seats. So just to think about that, we could have built 13 or 14 elementary schools, and it would have just only made up for the loss of seats because of that legislation. So specifically, why are we here today? We're here to identify schools that are operating on a year-round calendar but do not have long-term crowding concerns. So obviously, we try to come to you with situations that are least impactful to families, right? And so one of the things we often hear from families is, well, if you've got an underutilized school, just put more kids in the school, right? And that's obviously our first choice, right? Trying to assign students from additional schools that are overcrowded. Other options that we could consider are converting a multi-track year-round school to track 4 only or to traditional calendar. So to just kind of recap, I wanted to give you a visual. Here's the projected crowding for the middle schools for 24-25. As you can see, the areas in yellow are in that sweet spot of where we want our schools to be with their capacity. We only have a few schools that are considered overcrowded. But the others are all operating under that 90% threshold, which is not a bad thing. It's just we don't have those crowding concerns. We have available seats throughout the district to handle any long-term growth that's coming. And again, just a reminder of where we're looking. The circle on the left is Pine Hollow Middle School, so you can see the surrounding schools. And then on the right is Rollsville Middle. So let's talk about Pine Hollow Middle School first. So the projected enrollment for the 24-25 school year is 795 students. At a capacity of 1,248, that would give it a projected utilization of 63.7%. Okay, and again, that's under the multi-track year-round calendar. So how does that compare to the schools in the area? We talked about looking at neighboring schools, and if they're overcrowded, could we assign students from there? Well, here are the proximate schools to Pine Hollow. Leesville, Hilburn, and a reminder, Hilburn is a K-8 school, but this is the middle school capacity, West Millbrook, Carroll, and Durant Road. And just a reminder, West Millbrook and Carroll are magnet schools, and so they're able to actually take in students from other parts of the county, not just their base attendance areas. We've often heard from families, well, why don't you just magnetize the school? You have to meet certain criteria in order to get the magnet moniker, and so this school would not qualify for that. So Rollsville Middle School, same slides. Looking at their projected enrollment for next year is 883 with a capacity of 1,664, again under the multi-track year-round calendar, gives it a projected utilization of 53.1%. And the proximate schools, Heritage, Wake Forest, Neuse River, Durant Road, and East Millbrook. Okay, so I'm probably going to stop right here before we get into the public engagement, but I do want to just give you a little bit of info of what we've done to this point. So we'll go a couple more slides, and then I'm going to stop before we start getting back into the individual feedback we've heard from families. So staff contacted families living in the Pine Hollow and Rollsville Middle School base attendance areas who have children in grades 3 through 7 for the 24-25 school year. So we were projecting forward families that would be impacted in middle school come 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. We held virtual public information sessions on June 20th and the 26th. They were from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We also opened up a thought exchange link and sent that to all families that also contained a copy of the presentation. And that thought exchange was open through July 1. So the information you'll see in these subsequent slides that we'll show at the next meeting is information that we collected up until July 1. And so just like student assignment, we've created a web page for calendar conversion because we think this is really important for families, and I want to stop here for a second to really let this sink in. So just like student assignment, all things related to this conversation for Pine Hollow and Rollsville Middle, parents should go to this particular website. What we have is we have information and data on that web page. We have copies of the virtual public meetings. We recorded those, so we have those recordings up there as well. And we also have a frequently asked questions section where we started to answer some questions. And we'll continue to add to that as this process goes. And on the next slide, you can see a copy of some of the frequently asked questions that we have up there. So we are taking the questions that we're getting from these sessions. We are starting to respond to families. A lot of it in general is concern about alignment with elementary, and if I have siblings at the elementary, as you would guess, right? And then also, from a staff perspective, who we also reached out to, questions or concerns about, well, what happens for me? What options do I have if I want to continue on year-round? What happens if I'm now working 10 months instead of 12 months? All legitimate concerns that we will continue to address with staff. So I'm going to stop right here because this just gets into the feedback that we've collected. I know we didn't really get a chance to discuss it with all of you during the June Facilities Committee meeting. So I want to stop for a second, and if we need to go back to certain slides to give you a chance to really digest what we went over. But I do want to open it to some questions. What I'd like to do is come to you in August during the work session, and we can take that time. We'll start right around here where we're talking about the public engagement. We'll give you that feedback, let you digest that, and then answer any questions and concerns you have. Ultimately, what we would like to do is, staff is making a recommendation that we just can't continue on the multi-track year-round school calendar for these two schools moving forward. So the question comes, do we want to convert to a track 4 only or to traditional? And with those have pros and cons, and we can bring slides that will outline those a little bit more clearer for you next time. But I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to turn it over to you and see if you have any questions and answers up to now.
Thank you, Mr. Carrozza. This is something that it is only 2 schools, but it's a complicated issue. We'll see it come up in relation to other schools. Talking with Glenn before the meeting, one of the things that we thought would be very important is making sure we do get additional public feedback. There was the engagement activities that took place. We want to hear from all those families, but then there are other families that maybe didn't get a chance to participate and might be hearing about this for the first time. And so by giving it 2 weeks, we'll be able to hear from other families affected and really get people to weigh in. I know that the K-3 class size legislation really creates a real need we have for multi-track year-round elementary schools. We have some schools, middle schools in Wake County that are over capacity and could benefit from being multi-track year-round. But a question is, if they're under capacity and under capacity by this much, can we justify the extra cost? Now, I've heard from families that have multiple children, that would have children on a multi-track year-round elementary school, but like having middle school multi-track as well, because they can keep their kids on the same calendar longer. Not an option when they get to high school. Those are all going to be traditional or modified. But having that K-8 alignment is important to them, but it comes at a cost. And so, one thing is, does the cost justify that convenience? Is that right? Does convenience justify the cost? And then the second thing, too, is why do we see the decline in those schools? And that's something I'd like to learn more about. Are we seeing parents opting out of those schools as year-round middle schools because of the calendar? Is the calendar pushing some parents to choose private and charter school options because of the calendar? Or is it just some fluke of population growth or the schools in those areas? I don't want to assign reasons to people until I've heard from them. So those are some of the questions I had, and I appreciate, Mr. Kreza bringing this back to us in a couple of weeks after we've had a little more time with it. I know some of you had some questions as well. Mr. Hershey, I saw your hand.
Just when you bring these to us, and how do you define proximate? Because Carroll is 20 minutes from Pine Hollow, for example.
So we just looked at the schools that have somewhat of a border or a close border to the existing base attendance areas. Carroll was a little bit further out, just trying to show that it wasn't just something in that particular area. When you go back to that map, you can see that we don't have crowding concerns at middle school district-wide.
Got it. Appreciate it.
And you could have some families assigned to Pine Hollow that live like equidistant between Carroll and
Right.
Pine Hollow. It's just how the assignment area.
And there was another thing I wanted to add. You brought up the cost, but there's also the impact on students, right? Because when you have schools that don't earn enough teachers, right, there are choices that the school needs to make with then having larger class sizes, because they don't have class size limits at middle school. So they're sometimes forcing more children in a class because they're not earning enough teachers to run 2 classes. And so you'll often see that, and especially when you're running on a multi-track year-round calendar where you're trying to align off of 4 different tracks, or in these schools are only running on 3 tracks. You're having to spread the students over 3 tracks instead of being able to spread all of your teachers across all your students. So it makes it difficult when it comes to planning purposes. So I know the principals had a really hard time in operating an underutilized school, as well as trying to align with an elementary school if they have siblings. So it just puts a lot of stress on the district.
Ms. Evans?
When did the public engagement start? Because you did these 2 virtual sessions, and then you opened the thought exchange, but the thought exchange closed on July 1. So how much lead time did families have?
So we opened it on June 20th when we started our first presentation, because we wanted everyone to actually see the data first before we started to get feedback.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and how much lead time did they have to know about the virtual sessions?
I'm trying to think of when we I think it was maybe a week before that we had contacted them.
Okay, and did I hear you correctly? Because Chris, you said you want to hear more. So it's closed, you're going to open it back up?
We can, yes.
Okay, because I think that is important. And then you mentioned the August work session, but you didn't go as far to say that that's when we would decide. Is that the expectation, that we would make a decision in August?
So I think that's up to you, right? I think I've heard from you over the years that you want to give parents as long of a runway as possible when you're making these decisions, right? And so when you talk about a multi-track year-round calendar, right now we're at the 12-month mark. So if you make a decision today, you're giving families 12 months before they would actually, would have started school. And so that's more than we've ever done. I think when we've made calendar changes in the past, the latest we've done them is like February or March before that school year starts. Right. But a lot of times we've tried to do them in like December, November. So we are still several months ahead of that. So that's up to you. I mean, if you get technical about it, if they're going to switch to the traditional calendar, they don't start till August, so we're still over that 12-month mark. But I think it's important for families because they have a lot on their plate. They got to plan for vacations, they got to plan for care. And so this would be something that we'd want to give them as much time as possible.
And having that time will help staff too, if they're looking to transition between
Sure.
one calendar.
Yeah, and we also have like our budget department that if we have changes that we're going to need to make, we need to make sure that we get those included in our next budget. So we would need that full year roughly to get that done.
Well, I definitely advocate for the thought exchange opening back up.
Ms. Mahaffey, then Dr. Ing.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need more information, especially now when, I mean, I know most of our year-round families are back in session, but giving them the opportunity, in case they missed it, to say it again. And again, one of my questions was, will this be a part of the assignment plan, or will this be a separate decision? I guess that's TBD. Mr. Croza, how many tracks are Roseville Middle School and Pine Hollow Middle School running currently?
3. So for the last several years, because of the declining enrollment at the school, they've only operated on 3 tracks.
Okay, and are any of those tracks, like, I know this is more prevalent in the elementary school, where we'd say they're doubled up, meaning there's 2 classes per track, or is it kind of an equal distribution of students per track?
I wouldn't call it equal, but I don't think that they have multiple teams on either track. I can double check
Okay.
with the principals, but I don't think we have concerns about like doubling up.
And then, obviously, K-8 alignment is in our board policy. Have we heard from other schools about that mismatch, or maybe we don't have it yet, where a single track 4 sibling lineup and just needing to load track 4 with all siblings in a middle school, and then, track
not
1, 2, and
uncommon.
3 with singletons, or, those alignment openings for traditional calendar schools, if they need that alignment, like what, I guess it's more of an open-ended question, but like, what do you hear from administrators or families? And I imagine it is different for every family.
Yeah, and it's also regional, right? It's where you are. We tend to find year-round is more prevalent or more welcome in certain parts of the county as opposed to others. So I'd say that part of it's regional, but it is difficult. And it's really difficult for principals, especially when we have mismatched feeders, because we do have that throughout the district. You have, multi-track year-round schools feeding to a traditional middle or vice versa, or track 4 onlys feeding to a multi-track year-round. So it puts strain on that principal with those children feeding from the track 4 only school to keep them on track 4, and then you have existing families that are coming in that want track 4 that they don't have those options. So it becomes very difficult for the principals to plan accordingly when we don't have really strong feeders. And that's something the Office of Student Assignment has wanted to start to look at as, our work moving forward, is how do we try to work on our feeder patterns. I think the difficulty that we've initially found is we don't need multi-track year-round middle schools when you look at the data. We do need multi-track year-round schools because of the K-3 class size legislation. So is this a conversation that we need to start having as a district, that we move away from a K-8 alignment to more of a 6-12 alignment? Because parents want stability, right? And I think the best stability that we can offer because of that is a 6-12 alignment long-term. But, you often hear from families, when my children are younger, I want them at the same time, as their middle schoolers, because they can provide some care. So that's information we'll provide to you that you'll have to, make a decision on. But I think no matter how you shake it out, it's never going to be a nice, easy decision. Kind of like when we did the Westlake Elementary and Middle and Banks Road, where you had everyone who was all on board with that change, because we were able to do it all in one fell swoop, the elementary feeders and the middle school. We just don't have that ability in all cases moving forward. So that'll be something we'll talk about.
And I know there's more discussion. Dr. Ing, we'll go to you. I know that we will have the chance to bring this back. And as Ms. Mahaffey said, some very good questions. The question about will we make a decision or not in terms of to be determined, I sort of think what I think staff might be looking at is direction. So if they know that we want to make a change, that'll affect other changes they might make as they develop the reassignment plan. If they hear that we don't want to make a change, then there could be additional assignments made to try to address it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit further into the assignment plan, and I didn't really want to, muddle the two. But if necessary, we do have some opportunity to correct some of that, if that's something that you would ask of staff. We'd have to temper our expectations when we're talking about the amount of students or the situation, because, as you know, we've worked really hard, and Susan has done a great job of reaching out to families, doing engagement. These would be families that we hadn't engaged with at that point. So maybe we can, talk about, hey, this is something we'll look at for 26 if we want to consider that alignment moving forward. But I think for the start, for these two particular schools, our initial recommendation would be for 25, 26.
Thank you. Dr. Ray?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. Is it possible by the next meeting to give us some of the budget changes that may happen as a result of going from...
So potential budget changes?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. And if there's any differential between track 4 versus traditional, just wanted to get some sense of that.
Okay.
And I know we'll have a deeper discussion when we bring it back, but I thought it was good to get everyone's questions out now.
And I just wanted to let everybody know so we can say it publicly. The thought exchange is open. Okay, we've just opened it back up, and what we'll do is we'll get communications and send an email to those parents that we had sent them previously and let them know that we've opened it back up as well in case they weren't watching today.
Ms. Hoffeld, did you have one?
I don't actually have a question. I just want to say thank you. I was on the meeting with him, so I got to hear everybody's feedback, and I just wanted to give kudos to him and his department, because I know they went through a lot to be available for everybody and to put all the information out there. We've also sat with the town of Wake Forest and went over this, so he's probably got this running on overload over and over again at this point. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you put into it.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. All right, thank you. So there are more slides, but we'll get to those when we come back. All right, thank you, Glenn. All right, the next item we have is our strategic plan update. This is one that we've been meaning to get to. We've had some other issues that have come up in the last few meetings. It's time to get some feedback, and we don't want to delay it anymore. So, Dr. Robinson, we will turn it over to you and your staff.
Appreciate it. Board Chair, Haggerty Vice Chair, Johnson, the board members, Dr. Taylor. At me at the table this afternoon is Dr. Brad McMillan, Assistant Superintendent of Data Research and Accountability. Then we have Dr. Leanne Alford-Keith as well, Senior Director for Innovative and Strategic Initiatives. We are excited to share with you the progress and milestones of our strategic plan. As you shared earlier, we've been trying to get to this for some time, and so it's good for us to be here today. We have approximately 30 minutes allocated for this session. A lot of information to share. In front of you, you have a copy of the presentation to capture notes, and we would love for you to capture any notes that you may have with regards to any slide that you see. And what we'll do at that time, at the end of the presentation, we have an opportunity to answer questions. Any questions that are not answered at that particular time due to time constraints, we will respond to all questions via email. So what is our primary goal for today? Our primary goal is to review our current progress, discuss milestones we've achieved, evaluate our advancement against our goals and metrics, and outline our next steps to ensure continued progress. We hope to provide you with a comprehensive overview of where we stand, where we are, and where we are headed. As you may recall, during October 3rd, 2023 board presentation, we updated the board on the ongoing efforts of our staff. Since then, we have made significant progress with regards to aligning all action steps with the DEI assessment. We did refine our work groups, we created detailed timelines, and we even collaborated across departments to eliminate redundancies and utilize both internal and external processes to inform our decision-making. So the following is a snapshot of key milestones assigned to specific priorities, from launching innovative learning models and expanding mental health services to improving school safety and transportations. Our efforts are making tangible difference in the lives of our students and our staff. But before we go on and continue on, I would love to give Dr. Taylor an opportunity if he wants to speak to or highlight any specific milestones before Dr. Leanne Alford-Keith and Dr. McMillan goes more in detail.
And so they've done an outstanding job of identifying these updates. I do want to bring particular attention to the regional support team. I know as a school board, our biggest challenge is making sure that we have the support systems in place. So I do want to applaud Dr. Stacia Wilson Norman and what she's done with the academics team to put these specific teams in place. This is the platform that we know that will couple with the area superintendents and staff and academics to make sure we have specific and key support in all those areas where we know schools need that. And so this is a significant milestone. There are a number of things that we can talk about, but I think this is going to be one of the key things that's going to move us to eventually meeting all of the things that we've identified in our strategic plan. And we've got the measures to be able to measure that. So I just wanted to bring that one particular highlight out, but we're excited about where that's going.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Just so you're aware, we have many key milestones, but for the purpose of time, we're only going to hit a few today, and so we want to be respectful of your time.
He gave me 30 seconds.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So my piece here before I turn it over to Leanne is to talk a little bit about how we're doing against the goals and the other associated metrics that the board adopted as part of this plan. You recall last fall we sort of set a baseline on a lot of these things and said that that was our jumping off point for the progress that we were hoping to see make during the duration of the plan. And so today we're going to focus on a few things specifically. You'll notice that this goals and metrics slide here starts with goal number 4. You may recall we have 7 explicit goals in our strategic plan, but goals 1, 2, and 3 under the student knowledge and skills area are based on data that is not available to us yet in terms of proficiency, in terms of student growth and graduation rate. The state won't be releasing that information until right around Labor Day, and so that's going to have to come to you in a fall update. But goals 4, 5, and 6, we do have a pretty considerable amount of data around that we can share with you today. And so we're going to start with 4 and 5, which are under the student behavioral health priority, and share with you what we're seeing so far on those. So with respect to our attendance goal, you may recall that our goal is to have 95% of our students attending school for 95% of the days. So there's 2 95s in that goal. And in 2023, in the upper left here, you can see that our baseline for this was 49.3%. So just under half of our students in 2022-23 were attending school for at least 95% of days. And we hope to push that number up to 95 during the course of this plan. Moving left to right along that top row there, you can see that based on some preliminary numbers we've calculated so far, it looks like there's not a lot of progress on that. It may have even dipped a little bit on us over the last year. We are still waiting on final numbers from our friends in technology services, so that's why this is labeled preliminary down there in the lower right. But it looks like that number is still going to be a challenge for us going forward with about 48% for this last year. Now, one of the other associated metrics we have under attendance that we monitor is also what we call chronic absenteeism, and that's on the lower half of this chart in the blue. And so what that means is that's looking at the percentage of students who are missing 10% or more of their school days. And the reason that this is an underlying metric for this goal is because we know that while it's important for all kids to be in school all the time, kids who miss large amounts of school that we call chronically absent puts them at highest risk of academic failure. And so that's a group of kids that we really need to monitor closely. And on that front, it looks like we've gone from about 21% of students missing 10% or more of their school days to more like 19% this past year. So a bit of a mixed bag on the attendance goal here. While the overall number hasn't really moved in the direction that we want, those kids who are most at risk based on non-attendance, we seem to be cutting into that share a little bit based on last year's results. So we're happy to see that. Also under this particular priority, goal number 5 has to do with student behavioral health and student well-being. And as you know, we have our BIMAS universal screener that we use to track data on this, which measures 5 different domains of socio-emotional learning for students, which are represented there by the pairs of bars on the right-hand side. Last year, we were able to screen almost 60,000 students. That's up from only 35,000 the year before. This assessment is being staged out into more and more schools each year. It's not something that is in place in all of our schools just yet. Because of capacity and training needs, it's being done in stages, and as of last year, we're up to 115 schools that administered this assessment for their students. And when you look at the blue bars versus the pink bars, you can see that there's a little bit of upward movement from 2023 to 2024. But since that's actually 2 different groups of kids, we only had 35,000 in the first year, and we brought on dozens more schools in the second year. It's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison. But what it is doing is it's sort of coalescing around what I think is the start point for, or the baseline for where our district is if we were to be able to have this assessment administered in all of our schools. And the other thing that I'll point out here is that in these 5 SEL domains, we do, the chart data are not in this chart, but you will be getting it later on with a future update, is that the same disparity patterns that we see with academic achievement and graduation rate in our district are also evident on many of these SEL domains as well. So some additional metrics that we have under that particular strategic priority with respect to student behavioral and mental health suspensions is another metric that we track really closely. And that one is represented in the top row of this table here. And when you're looking at 2023 to 2024, you can see that we had a decline of about 400 or so in terms of the total number of out-of-school suspensions that students incurred year over year. So that's a positive movement for us. And then in the row right below that, we can also see that the total number of unique students who received 1 or more suspension also appears to have dropped by a couple of hundred, which is also a good sign. And then this next row here, the third row, is just to provide a little bit of context. I think it's even more informative to notice that these drops in not only the total numbers of suspensions, but the numbers of students involved in a suspension are going down in the context of more students coming into the district. We served about 2,300 more students last year than we did the prior year. Now notice this is not our enrollment number, this is totally the number of students who came into and out of the district at any given point during the year, because obviously any student who's here, even if they're only here for a month, could potentially be a student who is suspended. So while the number of students served is going up, the numbers are going down. So we're glad to see that that's not just a function of fewer kids in the district, it's actually going down while we're adding kids. And then as a result, you do the math by dividing row 2 by row 3, and you get the percentages on the bottom that show that less than 5% of our students are involved in a suspension at any point during the year, and that is also a little bit down from 2023. We also monitor ratios of support staff, specifically social workers, school psychologists, nurses, and counselors in the district as another associated metric under student behavioral health. And here you can see the year-over-year ratios. Just for interpretation purposes, I'll read the first one at the top there. In 2022-23, we had 1 social worker in the district for every 1,242 students. And then last year, that ratio slipped on us just a little bit and went to 1 for every 1,254 students. And you'll see that same pattern repeat itself for the psychologists and the nurses and the counselors as we go down from top to bottom, that those ratios got slightly less favorable in 2023-24 than they did the prior year. The result, the underlying numbers there are basically that the number of positions that we had did not change, but we added a few more students last year, and that's why the ratios are sort of going in the opposite direction, not because we cut or lost positions, but we had the same number of staff serving slightly more students. And then just as a benchmark on the far right there, we have the recommended ratios from national professional organizations for where in a perfect world we would love for those ratios to be, to make sure that we're providing the full range of services to all of our students. And as you can see, it's still quite a challenge to get near some of those nationally recommended numbers from the requirements we're starting. Mental health referrals is another metric that we have been monitoring, and our baseline number for 2022-23 is over there on the left. We have 320 total mental health referrals for students in the 2022-23 school year. This year, that has jumped significantly to almost 600, and you can see that that's a pretty big change from 2022-23. Our student support services staff are in the process of unpacking these numbers to try and find out a little bit about what is behind it. Your knee-jerk reaction might be that kids are having more crisis moments now than they were in the past. However, it's also possible that we're just getting a lot more efficient about getting the services to the kids who need them and are able to serve more kids more efficiently now than we had in the past, or it could be a combination of both. But our student support services staff are unpacking sort of what some of the cause and effect might be behind that for the significant jump from last year in terms of kids who are being served. And then lastly, no accounting of behavioral health metrics would be complete without talking to the people who actually work and learn in our schools every day. Counting the things that are countable is important, but that's not necessarily the full picture. So this fall, we're going to be bringing you some results from our district-wide student and teacher surveys, where we ask our students and our teachers every year about various aspects of the behavioral environment in schools and their perceptions of that, to help give us sort of a really full picture of that assessment, not just including the hard numbers, but also including the perceptions of those people who are living that experience every day. And that'll be coming to you later this fall. Moving on to operational effectiveness, we have 2 goals in that area, and I'm going to talk primarily about the first one and then just hit on the second one real briefly. Our first goal has to do with family engagement, and the data that support that goal come from our annual Panorama Family School Relationship Survey that we do every spring. And on the left here, you can see the year-over-year change in the percentage of parents who responded favorably to 2 types of items on that survey. The first is the blue line, and that represents their perceptions about how easy it is for them to engage with their child's school. And you can see that stayed level at 86% favorability rating year over year. And the second set of questions has to do with their perception of the school climate. You can see we had a small improvement from 74 to 75% in terms of positive response from parents last year. So moving a little bit in the positive direction, but I think the numbers on the right-hand side of the slide here are just as important. When the plan was being adopted, the board had long conversations about how do we go about reaching every family and making sure that the feedback we're getting families truly represents everybody in all of our communities. And you can see here the number of responses that we got this past year, thanks to some hard work from our communications folks in Title I and our individual schools. We had an 8% increase in the number of responses district-wide, and within our Title I schools, we had a 15% increase in the number of families that responded. So while this is still not every family in the district, and we still have work to do, I think some of the outreach and communications that schools and other folks in our offices engaged in this year is paying off, and we are starting to get more and more response from folks to make sure that these numbers are not just representing a subset of our community, but they're, to the extent we can get it, representing all of our parents. So that's I think, a positive takeaway here as well. Additional metrics under operational effectiveness, we have a handful of those to share with you today as well. With respect to technology, network uptime has been very strong for the last 2 years in terms of keeping our systems up and running. We had a significant jump in the percentage of our staff who successfully completed phishing training this past year, from 52 up to 63%, which is great because we all know how problematic that can be from a ransomware and hacker perspective these days. And then the last number along the bottom gives us the percentage of staff who have been successfully identifying phishing emails. Our technology services people will surreptitiously send emails in random ways to employees all year long, and they keep track of how many of those emails are responded to appropriately by our staff, and that's where these metrics are coming from. And you can see we're down a little bit year over year, 95 down to 92%, meaning that we had slightly more staff who were phish prone this past year than we were the year before. Now, if Sashi wants to chime in here, I'd be happy to let him do it, but I can speak from my own department's perspective that some of the phishing emails that we are getting are really, really, really realistic, really good. And I've had some complaints from my staff about they're just trying to trick me with this stuff. This looks very legitimate. And so I think probably, and in response to the fact that the reality is that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think as we are starting to infuse that, what do you call the fish attempts, made up fish attempts, right? Our security team has become much more smarter to really make sure that when we send an attempt, it's very close to the realistic thing. So yeah, it's a continuous improvement.
We also have human resources metrics under operational effectiveness, and this one is a key one here. This looks at our number of school-based vacancies that we have, and it's based on a snapshot that's taken every October. Our human resources folks look to see how many school-based teaching and instructional assistant vacancies exist each October from one year to the next. And you can see between 23 and 24, we had a drop of over 100 vacancies. So we were much better staffed this past fall than we were 2 falls ago with respect to those school-based positions. And that improvement was true for teachers as well as IAs when you disaggregate those numbers into their 2 parts there. So that's very encouraging. Transportation, we have several metrics there to share with you today. One of them is our bus efficiency rating up at the top. And I apologize for some of the small font here. We were trying to put a lot of stuff in a small slide deck. But we went from near 100% to 100% in our bus efficiency rating year over year. Our bus inspection score, however, did slip a little bit from 23.4 to 29. And in that particular scale, a lower score is better in terms of the number of mechanical and operational defects that might exist on a random sample of buses that the state looks at. Our bus driver vacancy rate also increased slightly year over year from about 31 to about 36%, as you can see in row 3 there. And then we've got a baseline now for our bus mechanics and maintenance vacancy rate as well for the first time, which you see there on the right for 23-24, which is at 30.8%. Now, in conflict with the vacancy rate, our bus driver daily absentee rate actually improved last year from 13 to 11.7%. So even though we did have a little more vacancies year over year on average, that's a monthly average of vacancies, by the way, in case you're interested. Absentee rate got better last year, so that's promising. And then down here at the bottom, when we look at our average number of uncovered bus runs per month, you can see between the second half of 22-23, which is the only time frame for which we had data available last year, significant improvement in the number of average uncovered runs per month from 872 all the way down to 237. So big improvement there as well in terms of how that's going. As with the other goal areas, we do have some additional metrics that fit under that operational effectiveness category that I've detailed here, and that's going to be also part of the update that we bring you later on in October when we're able to bring you the information on Priority 1 as our Priority 1 area as well. So you can look forward to more information on that in the fall as well. Now, before I turn it over to Leanne, I did want to point out a little bit about our Goal 7 metric. This is something new for us that Dr. Taylor helped launch this year, our employee engagement survey. For the first time that we've been given a workplace satisfaction survey to literally all of our employees and all of our job roles in the district. And that survey just closed a couple of weeks ago. After some significant push and outreach, we managed to get about 70% of our employees, over 15,000 of our employees, to respond to that survey. And that data is being unpacked right now, and that will also be part of the fall update that we bring you with regard to all the other missing bits that we mentioned along the way. But that's pretty hot off the presses, but we're really excited about that. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne, and she's going to talk to you about aims and implementation.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So we can know what data are safe, but it's also important to know how did we do this work. So we're going to look at several highlighted aims that are examples. Again, we are pulling out some highlights for you. So this isn't everything, but it are some things that especially represent shifts in how we're doing the work and the way that we're doing work differently under this strategic plan. So the first one is A1, about high-quality professional learning communities. What's different about the way we've done this work is that it was really co-created with pilot schools. So there were 7 volunteer schools who participated in a pilot and got to co-create these materials with our Office of Professional Learning, really being very responsive to what they indicated what they needed. And you see some of their survey data here showing that as well. We are excited that this resource that was co-created with those schools last year will be available to every elementary school this upcoming year, and that they will begin to pilot with our middle schools this upcoming year to co-create in a similar way. Of course, Dr. Taylor already shouted out our work around AIM 2 and the regional support model. This represents strategic alignment in a new way between departments and divisions so that school support really feels aligned in the way that they receive it. Also really important to AIM 2 is the development of the new learning model, as well as a landing page and extensive professional learning catalog that supports that landing model or that learning model for all of our teachers and instructional leaders and principals, administrators. That information went out last week, and I know we're hearing initially really strong feedback about those opportunities. Also, within Priority 1, AIM 5, Professional Learning Pathways for instructional and non-instructional staff, work has been done to develop, as this is something completely new for us. This isn't something that ever existed in the past. So throughout this year, our Office of Professional Learning has been working with several other departments in order to say what are those needs that we're hearing from those instructional staff and those non-instructional staff as well. Looking next at some Priority 2 examples. The first one is a non-safe, inclusive learning environment. There have been several things done there to develop a behavioral health framework that is most importantly also aligned to the learning model that you see in AIM 2. So a new shift in the work that we don't look at these things separately, but we look at those together, how those behavioral health impacts do show up in our learning outcomes, as well as several new supports and interventions that they've been working to develop for students, and additional support and employee wellness as well. So those are highlights for AIM 9. Also, AIM 12, something that you heard about in Community Engagement Committee, but it does represent another shift in the way that we do our work, which is by engaging our community more. So we are working now on the Community Partnership Mapping Initiative so that we can establish some better communication loops with all of our communities, as well as looking forward to launching next year the Community Resource Task Force, which is really going to be focused on problem solving and bringing in those community members to help us identify and break down the barriers that they're facing in providing the resources needed to our students. So again, a different way of doing the work in involving our community more. Looking next at AIM 13, the equity framework. A highlight here that you may not have heard about before is really focused work that the Office of Equity Affairs partnered with our area superintendents on in order to align school improvement plans to our equity framework and roadmap, as well as a toolkit that was provided to all of our schools in order for them to be able to look at the disparities in their data and to respond by critically reflecting and redesigning. AIM 15, we have those 4 verbs that were important to you all in that AIM: recruit, hire, develop, retain. You can see examples of work that we have been undergoing in all of those areas outlined here. Really, again, want to highlight the creation of additional professional learning opportunities, as well as expanding our community partnerships in this area as well. And then AIM 18, something, again, certainly you've heard a lot about in Safety and Security Committee, but some things that we wanted to highlight for the benefit of the public that we're doing for safety and security are really looking at all of our school safety plan audits. They have all been re-vetted, and we have put in several new procedures alongside those to make sure that they are effective. We are currently piloting a new program for rapid response. We'll be able to study those results and decide what it means for all schools based on those who are piloting this fall, as well as expanded community outreach and partnerships and additional feedback that we're collecting from the community around safety and security as well. So that is another highlight that threads through several of those aims, security included. And finally, AIM 19, as you all know, there has been lots of focused and intensive work around making sure that we have timely, efficient, reliable transportation services, really focused on 3 areas here: recruitment, retention, and efficiency upgrades. You can see examples of all of those things here, and you saw in the information that Brad shared how we are starting to see some movement in those areas, such as our lowering bus driver absentee rate. So we are getting some movement from some of those efforts as well. And so now I will turn it back over to Dr. Robinson, who will close us out.
That's fine. There was another slide that was in there that really talked about our next steps. So I know that we're going to come back in October and provide another update. And that update is really going to be focused on priority 1, which is really going to focus on the goals and the metrics with review and what that looks like. I know we gave a lot of information today, but we have so much more information to share. But we wanted to make sure that we were able to capture some of the things that we're doing so that the board can understand that our strategic plan is truly a living document that is coming to life. You can see some of the things that we talked about and discussed during its iteration, and now that vision is coming to reality as people are making shifts in our work to align with the expectations of how we're going to move our work forward. I know that I actually write down some questions in this packet that you have, and we definitely want to be able to capture all the questions you have. However, we did make time, so we have a couple of minutes that we're hoping to answer any questions that you guys may have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robinson. So you know how long it took us to develop the strategic plan. We won't be taking that long to ask questions about the progress so far, but I know there are some key questions folks have. So Evans, if you want to start off.
Specifically with AIM 18, the safety upgrades, down in that community outreach, what can you say, if anything, about the parent education events this fall? Because I know we do like some online virtual programming like, what can you tell us about what you're thinking?
Yep, so I know that there is a partnership that's being developed with our Parent Academy that's led by Dr. Maria Rosa Rangel and Mr. Kendrick Scott in security. And so they're working together to get some security options into Parent Academy. What specifically those will be, I don't know, but I know they're collecting feedback about what it should be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Hershey?
A couple items. One, I'm wondering if we can do some of this work either at the board retreat or we can do some small group sessions because it is
Absolutely.
too much to absorb in this. And we're not turning this in, are we? Because I want to
I would love
kind of
to.
rewatch it.
No, that's fine. You can keep them, but at all means, if you have a lot of questions that you really want to answer when you come out of your office, just drop it off,
Okay.
and we can get a copy, because we want to be able to provide that information. And as you guys continue to ask questions, I would love to hear your feedback with regards to, is there something you would like to see us do differently, other than probably elongate and make more time to dive into it a little bit?
So a couple of data points. I'm really interested in kind of the subgroup breakdowns rather than the whole number, and also how we are comparing to other large districts for some of these metrics, particularly the school nurses and the breakdown, because how are we doing compared to the state level and national, and just the big districts, not the smaller districts.
Absolutely. Great point, well taken. And when we come back in October, we'll have that information.
As best you can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Because
It
some of
doesn't-
these are
Right.
brand new things. We've only started tracking, and I'm sure there's other districts that may not be tracking them at all.
Sure.
Yeah. Further questions? All right, so we've dutifully put our questions into the binders. Everyone but Sam will be turning them into you.
I'm not turning mine.
So I guess we should put our names on them.
No names are necessary, because when we respond, we want to respond to everyone.
Okay.
And that way, we'll get a capture that way. But is there any feedback, anything that you would like to see us do differently as we present this information?
Any feedback, any questions?
I mean, give us more than 15 minutes. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's been
Or
addressed.
smaller subsections and deeper dives.
Smaller chunk?
Yeah.
Smaller chunk, deeper dive?
Yeah,
Okay.
potentially.
We were trying to capture everything, we were supposed to be here in April, and so we just kept getting bumped, so we just tried to give you everything that we've done up to this point. But point well taken, and we'll make sure that we modify it in such a way that we can go shorter but a lot deeper into some of the topics that we discuss and share.
And I know some of the things are still dependent on getting data back from the state.
Absolutely.
Ms. Caulfield?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could have more time with our homework and a little bit more information, because some of it all involves questions and more detail.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm keeping mine for right now. Sure.
Absolutely.
Dr.
Yeah,
A.
same.
Thank you for reminding me about the fishing training.
Agreed. I got 20
Thank you.
All right. We have another important item on our agenda today, and that is the Wake Young Women's and Wake Young Men's Leadership Academy University Partner Recommendation. So for this, let's see Mr. Williams, let's see Mr. Rosa, let's see. Give a minute to transfer the presentation over.
Tissue box.
Okay.
Board Chair Hegarty, Vice Chair, that's Jocelyn, all our board members. Dr. Taylor, of course. First of all, just glad to be here today. We've been back and forth, and progress is being made, so that's a beautiful thing. Hopefully we won't be before you too long, but we do have a few items that we want to make sure that we put in front of you. So first of all, just know that Dr. Lane wanted to be here, but she's not feeling well today. So we said, of course, by all means, we'll make sure we update her tomorrow, okay? But moving forward, just want to make sure we just read some context once again. As all of you know, we were partnered with St. Augustine's. We had to end that partnership with St. Augustine's. I do believe all of our transcripts and all of that have been taken care of, and our students are in a good place. Also, as you know, that we were looking at various colleges and universities. We were able to narrow it down to Shaw University and Mississippi State as potential partners as we move forward with these two academies. Also, since we last met, Representative Potter and the contingency group, I guess, representing our area, came together to make sure a nice House bill was put in place, 900, that allowed for us to immediately choose a new partner starting next year and moving forward. That bill went from the House to the Senate, back to the House. It was magical to watch all of that take place. I do want to thank Mr. Hershey for being there. I think also a couple other board members came to a few of the sessions as well, so we appreciate that. Long story boring, what I'll say is the bill has passed and the governor, thank goodness, has signed off on that. So this allows our two academies to be able to move forward with the partner. With that, on the right of the screen, you'll see that we did have a thought exchange. I've talked to you about that. On the date mentioned there, it shows you how many participants participated and how many thoughts were exchanged and impressions and all of that. So before we move forward to talk about those particular partners, I do want to turn it over to my colleague, Glenn Carosa, because this bill allows us to now make sure that we have a calendar in place. And at some point, we want to make sure that you as a board give a thumb up and say, hey, we're with it and we're ready to move forward. So I'll turn it over to Glenn.
Thank you. So each year, generally around early spring, we'll bring calendars to you for our early colleges for approval. So this year, considering the transition that we're looking at, we were thankful to keep these students on an early college calendar because the Cooperative Innovative High School works with a college or university, and so we've always operated under that school or university's calendar. And so this is the calendar that we will be presenting to you for approval this evening for the Wake Young Men's and Wake Young Women's Leadership Academies. It aligns with the Wake Tech calendar, their partner university for the 24-25 school year. Very similar to the one that they've had at St. Aug, but not exactly the same. But this has been the calendar that we've presented to families since the spring as the one that we had anticipated that they would be using for the upcoming school year.
So if you want to look at that for a moment, please do so. While you're looking at that, I do want to personally thank Wake Tech Community College, their president, for coming in and supporting us tremendously. You don't know how many meetings behind the scenes they've had with us and just trying to make sure our students were ready to go for the fall. So I just want to make sure publicly we put a huge thank you out there to Wake Tech. Any questions on the calendar?
And again, we'll be bringing this for a vote this evening.
So hearing no questions about that, our next item to kind of have dialogue about is our two potential partners, one of them being North Carolina State University, the other being Shaw University. we have created a document that kind of outlines some of the things that both universities have to offer, some things that our families were asking for, and if each particular university could provide those particular options. And I'm hoping that you've had time to kind of look at that particular document as we continue to move forward. And also, I do believe some of our board members asked about financial information, financial records. As all of you know, Shaw University is a private university, so you're not going to be able to just go to their website like most private universities and dig deep to find financial information. But they did provide information to us. Right now, we'll just talk about the basics if you would like us to, but because of the fact that they're a private university, because of the credentials that our chief finance officer has, we want to reserve certain things for closed session as well. So at this point, I just would love if Mr. Nita would just basically give us some information as far as what he has provided as far as the financial records, which is basically an audit report for several years.
Because it's more than maybe 1 or 2 cents on that here. Shaw University did provide to us, well, actually, let me, before I start with that, Shaw University, as you've heard, is a private university. Their financial statements are not a matter of public record. They did provide to us, however, 4 years' worth of audited financial returns. Their fiscal year, which I don't think is really a matter of privacy, is the same as the fiscal year of the Wake County school system. It runs from a July 1 to a June 30th period.
Sorry, Mr. Newberry, will you speak up? I can barely hear you.
Yes. We received 4 years
Thank
of
you.
audited financial statements from Shaw University. And as I started out with saying, they are a private university, and their financial statements are not a matter of public record. And the 4 years we received, and their fiscal year is the same as our district's fiscal year. They run from July 1 through June 30th. And we received their statements for fiscal year 23, 22, 21, and 20. And when I say fiscal year 23, that means the year ending June 30th, 2023. So we received the statements for the period ending June 30th, 2020 through June 30th of 2023, 4 years. They were all audited. The audit firm doing the audit is BDO LLP. I'm not personally familiar with them, but I did review. They're a national firm. They have a presence they have 75 offices across the country. They list that they have, and this is based upon their web presence, they being BDOs. I've done no research beyond their web presence. They list themselves as having 12,000 professionals. They list their total U.S. revenues as $2.89 billion. So based upon their web presence, this audit firm, while they're not one of the largest players out there, they're not just a local auditor either. They're far from that. The only other thing I can really share with you, or I am comfortable sharing with you in public, would be that for all 4 years, the auditor made the following statement. And again, I can share, and this is what I'm sharing has nothing to do with Shaw by itself, but rather what an auditor is attesting to when they do a financial audit of an institution. And I'm going to put this in layperson's terms.
the audit function of an organization's financials is to ensure that what is on the financial statements fairly reflects what is actually out there in the organization. And that's in layperson's terms. Those are not technical terms. It's not a matter of looking for fraud. That's not the purpose of a financial audit. There is a little bit of looking at internal controls, but that's not the formal purpose. The primary purpose of a financial audit is to provide an opinion as to whether the financial statements fairly represent that organization's financial position. So with that said, I am comfortable reading one sentence from the auditor's report to you, and this sentence is in all 4 audit reports for those 4 years I shared. In our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the university as of, and then it lists the year ending. So you would have that same statement for each of those 4 fiscal years.
Thank you, Mr. Needle. So that's what he wanted to say in open session. And we'll probably revisit some things in closed session. But I also wanted to make sure that before we go towards a recommendation, that we also look at our key contributors in the decision-making process. So we looked at the courses being offered on both campuses, leadership development opportunities, course offerings, and let me go back to that first bulleted item again. Wake County courses and universities courses being offered on campus, meaning is a situation where we could have our Wake County teachers on a campus teaching our courses. And one particular university said yes, without a doubt. The other one said only university courses. I need you to understand that part. Going down to bullet item 3, course offerings, university amenities, Wake County students are allowed to access. I won't read all the items to you, but those are the key contributors in the decision-making process. I would love it if you, the board members who were part of this small group committee, to just talk a bit about certain things you all discussed as a small group as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think we really thought and spoke about what families were looking for, some of their priorities. Do you want me to get into detail, or do you want me to be broad?
Be broad right there.
Just between these 2 universities, I spoke a lot with families, so I was their voice in this meeting, and I think as board members, we fully understood where they were coming from and what they wanted and what they were looking for, what was important to them as they thought about and heard feedback from their kids who are in this program. That weighed heavily, but also it was really important to us as board members that due diligence was done on all aspects of this decision-making, so we are not back in this situation anytime in the near future. And that's really what I think our focus was on, and I think we did a good job of asking the right questions and responding to what staff and to what our families looked at and told us. That's as broad as I can be.
And the only thing I would echo here in the broad stroke of it is, I felt like we took all the information that you all gathered alongside the information that you provided us, both Dr. Taylor and Mr. Domenico, on what the requirements are now from the state. And I felt like the information of Stan being the spokesperson from families our recommendation and our thoughts were really based on those two pieces of information, which I personally believe we talked in depth, even though it was clear to me, I'll speak for me, that it was an easier choice because we knew one option gave parents almost all of the things that they wanted. And I still believe it's a priority that our young people are young people. And it was important to me that there was a space for them available on the campus. And I would say for me, that was kind of the major key indicator for me in my decision making.
And I don't think there was any real disagreement. I think it was pretty obvious and easy for all of us based on everything Ms. Johnson-Hustler just said.
Thank you. You want to chime in? The board members who...
Oh, sure. I agree with everything that's been said. I know we talked about this in the meeting that we had on Friday about, for me, what was a clear choice. The smaller class, the smaller setting, and whatnot. So I won't go into too many details because I don't want to...
Just keep it broad about what we talked about on Friday.
That's exactly what I...
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I can't remember.
That said, I'm going to look toward my superintendent to kind of finish it up as far as everything that you've heard and any comments you want to make, sir.
So, first of all, I do want to thank staff who have been diligent to this process along the way. There have been so many things that we did not expect, and we just had to really make it happen. So I know this could not have happened without the work you guys put in. They've done a really wonderful job in vetting the information. I particularly want to thank Board Member Hershey, who's been deeply involved in this process, and I can tell you all that as a board, he has represented you all well, so that is very much appreciated. This has obviously not been a wonderful process for us, but we've gone through it. I feel that our final vetting with the committee on Friday really represented what we think the board's decision and desire will be. And so with that, we're prepared to say to the board that Shaw University would be the selectee that we would have. And at that point, we will just listen to any questions or comments that the board has had. I think when we narrowed it down and looked at those two final universities, I think it was clear in terms of what we felt would be the benefit for the district. And so with that, we'll just see if there are any questions that you have.
Ms. Evans?
I don't have a question, but I want to reiterate my thanks. Reiterate what you just said. You don't look like you've aged very much, but I bet you feel like it.
You're brave, definitely.
I can't, we all know what it's like when you get added layers of meetings, et cetera, but I know this has been really stressful, and I just can't thank you enough. And I want to acknowledge how much more time and energy and everything was invested these last so many months. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
And to the board members that were really plugged in.
Mr. Swanson?
I also just want to thank the leadership of those two leadership academies, Principal Walker and Principal King, for their, imagining what they're going through in this moment, how they have been able to keep the faith and keep everything going afloat for the families. So I'm grateful for them and to you, Mr. Williams, and the entire team. Yes, Paul, thank you, sorry. I kept hearing it, but it was like, it just wouldn't come out, so thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Any other comments, any other questions? I know that we'll have this coming up on the full agenda.
I do have one thing, and I'm going to raise this so my board members are aware. One thing that I would like to add to this is, because it's Leadership Academies, is talking to Shaw about the potential to house our men's academy, either 9 through 12 or 10 through 12. I know Ms. Caulfield joined me and could see how tight it is. Mr. Crozer was there as we talked to Shaw going forward to see if they have that capacity for that. And because they lag behind in their numbers, and they lag behind in space. And then the other request for the Leadership Academies, I know Chief Ellis is not here, but I know real estate had looked at the campus where the Young Women's Academy is, and they said to check back in October and November, so I would ask that we make sure we do that to maybe get them some more space as well, as they are working on their, actually, both places are working on their master plans now, so any opportunity to gain some space for our students would be fantastic. It is very fantastic.
But I know they have lots of plans coming up for the future, so.
Yeah.
All right. I know that we'll get another chance to talk about this. Mr. Williams, Mr. Domenico, Mr. Croza, everyone, really appreciate all of your hard work on this, building the airplane while you're flying it. So thank you so much. If there are no other questions, all right, thank you. Board, what do we like to do next? It says adjournment for the work session. However, I would entertain a motion that we go into closed session.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Hershey, a second from Mr. Swanson. So we go into closed session for the statutory reasons cited in our agenda for the regular meeting at this time. All in favor of Mr. Hershey's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll give everyone a moment to clear the room, and then we'll proceed. Thank you very much, everybody.
I think
I think it was my first option. Because I found these earrings. No, I did not.
let me figure out who's here. I think Title IX is first. Neil will be in for that, and then we would do that. It's the plan. If we can get it all done by Thursday. Okay. That's the plan. That's the current plan. Assuming everybody else.
Yeah, I
guess I made a motion.
I feel some type of way about this.
Hey, that's what I'm going to say everything.
I got off that phone with y'all last night.